solo today. Solo pod, 2 wash-ups, 1 pro. Me and Danu. Welcome to my office, coming live from my desktop computer. The audio is coming out of my TV. It just doesn't get.
We make it work. We make it work, baby, for you guys. Any time of day, any location, we will get the pod recorded and going. Yeah, so me and JoJo here decided to do, we just haven't had a moment in the last couple months to kind of just, get some one-on-one time, as I like to say. So yeah, so we are going to dive in. First, I want Joe to give us a little, everyone knows we hit November. It's kind of like that time of year. This is what I love about soccer. That time of year where it's like the holidays are coming, right? So like things kind of feel exciting. You're getting invited to like little events, whatever. But college soccer and NWSL are back. They're back with us being able to participate. And I don't know about you, Joe, but we watched the spring. We watched the in Cary, we watched the spring version of whatever that was, the tournament. It is just doesn't feel right. November is the tourney month for women's soccer. And it's kind of nice this year as long it's nice. I know the NWSL players are tired. It's like a very long season. It is nice to see them kind of overlap. It's like a lot of women's soccer going on, which is really exciting. But give people a little bit of a landscape of what's the vision right now for CSU. Where are you? Season's over. What's next?
Yes. So D2 is about a week or so behind D1. So right now, last week we finished up our regular season. We went undefeated the regular season. Peach belt regular champs. So now this weekend we're going into our first round of the PBC tournament. So we play one game this weekend against Georgia Southwestern, and then hopefully if we win, then the PBC tournament is then hosted, the semi and final on a good old Friday Sunday fixture setup, and then following that. I'm still figuring out, it's complicated. The NCAA is complicated when it comes to D2 because in D1, UCLA can fly out to an East Coast team, whereas D2, we don't have that funding. And so it's all within region. So it's all like rankings based on region, and getting out of your region then puts you to the Final Four. So everything, it doesn't really matter about national rankings. It's solely on your region ranking is like pretty much the most important thing is what I've learned.
Well,
so a little synopsis.
Yeah, there's no mistake on this pod. When it comes to D2, we are CSU Cougars, as I like to say. Full support. We are like in it to win it. The TWOPs are ready to see a natty for the D2 team. Now, D1, I gotta give a little praise. You're who's baby. You're who's baby. Number 1 in the nation. Hello. Gotta give a little love to my girls and my Wahoos. We're excited about it. So ACC tournaments this weekend, but everyone knows it's
the hardest
time of year.
ACC is the hardest conference in the country. Tooting on the UNC horns here. We did not make the tournament for the first time ever, ACC tournament. Yeah. But yet
it's 6 this year.
Our RPI, our RPI is 4 in the nation, and our ranking was 7. And we did not make the ACC tournament. That just shows how freaking hard.
And you'll be seated.
Yeah. Crazy.
Yeah. So anyway, it is as I like to say, it's just that special time. I don't know about you, Joe, but like fond memories for me was like getting to practice seeing that like kind of crisp green grass, and it's like November, the leaves are changing.
You don't want to be home for Thanksgiving. You don't want to be home for Thanksgiving.
No. You're like, I ain't having no turkey at home. Nope.
Nope.
So on that topic, we decided we wanted to just get kind of honest about what, our thoughts in regards to, obviously teams are tactically getting ready, and getting things down on paper, understanding their opponents, doing a lot of film study, whatever it may be for your school or team. But I think there's not enough discussion on kind of the mental aspect of the postseason play. Because at this point of the season, and we've seen it time and time again, in the regular season, if you're, let's say, a top team, in your conference or in the country, whatever it may be, a hard loss, call it, it's something, it's as stinging, but it's not as long stinging, right? Like, it's like, okay, well, we know we have another game. We're at a point in the year, especially once we get in the NCAA tournament, it's one and done, right? And in soccer, especially, which is what I love about the sport, the best team doesn't always win. And we see it time and time again at the EPL level, all the way down to, high school. So there's a lot that goes into that. There's a lot of pressure that goes into that. And we wanted to kind of speak to our experience, but also our thoughts around, okay, what are these players going through? And how, like, I feel like it's a topic we need to discuss, because I don't think it's given enough attention. And then, like, when these losses happen, I feel like people need to sympathize with that, right? They need to understand what these women are going through and how much work goes into this whole year, and how it comes down sometimes to truly one game. And guess what? One team wins. So a lot of people are disappointed. Oftentimes you are disappointed because the odds are not in your favor. But let's start off, Joe, by talking a little bit about our experiences. So we're going to set the stage here. I'm going to let Joe start. Me and Joe, while I'm proud, and I, from an accomplishment standpoint, we both played at two of the top women's soccer programs in the country. But on that note, we are not particularly successful in regards to our trophy rooms, right? Me and Joe are not necessarily having trophy rooms at this point in our life. So let's set the stage a little bit about your experience kind of in the postseason play, and how that experience it made you feel one way as you got older, and then now the shift that you're in now and kind of having a new mentality around it.
Yeah, so for me, I came into North Carolina in 2013, right after they won the 2012 national championship. And so my freshman year, we came in, and I think it's really interesting, is I always tell kind of freshmen and underclassmen is like, don't take 1 year for granted. And as a freshman, you can kind of get in that idea of like, okay, like we still have 3 more years, da 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 da. Well, 3 more years turns into 2 more years and turns into 1 more year. And then all of a sudden you're left empty handed with no national championship. And going to a school at UNC where you're pretty much guaranteed a national championship if you go there. And so coming into North Carolina post Natty championship year, we were the only class that didn't have a national championship at that point. The sophomores had one, the juniors, seniors, red shirts, whatever. And so we go in, we lose in a heartbreaker in double overtime to UCLA. And, then we go in and, there's next year. Well, next year we lose 10 starters and we're a completely different team. We're young. We ended up winning regular season that year, which was, like we said in the beginning, the ACC is the toughest conference. So that's a big accomplishment. And not a lot of people talk about how sophomore and junior year for us team, they moved the ACC tournament to 4 teams. Yep. So making that 4-team ACC tournament was, although I don't have a trophy for it, those were some pretty remarkable runs to make it, 1, regular season champions, and 2, into that tournament. Junior year was tough. So we lost in the Sweet 16 my sophomore year. Junior year, we were flying, we were rolling. We had number 1 in the country. We had 6 starters tear their ACL, myself being one of them. And that was extraordinarily difficult to swallow. My tour after the ACC tournament, going into NCAA, and blacked out a little bit about that, but pretty sure we lost in the second round after 6 or 7 starters tore their ACL. So then all of a sudden I'm 3 years in and I don't have a national championship. And then my redshirt senior year, the girls were able to go to the Final Four, and we weren't able to pull it out against West Virginia. West Virginia goes to the national championship final. And then my senior year, we won ACC Championship, so got to hoist that big old thing, which was really, really special, especially being a fifth year at that point and realizing how darn difficult it is to win and be on top. I knew that in club. We won everything under the sun in club, but I hadn't won anything in a really long time. And so it was really special to win that. We unfortunately went out in the, I think, Sweet 16 my fifth year, and my original class was the first group not to win a national championship at UNC. Not one of the records you want to hold, but it took about 3 or 4 years for me to finally say that and say it not being ashamed. I'm going to be honest. It was tough for a while to be that one class that kind of started, and I don't want to say trend, but starting not to win a national championship. We won other things, but at UNC, we expect to win a national championship, and I failed. I failed in that aspect.
And I don't like using, to be honest, and I'm just going to push back on you a little. I don't love the word failed. I just think it insinuates.
I'm okay saying it.
Yeah. For me, it's sometimes I don't even like to put that aura out there, because I think when you set success and then you counteract it with failure, everything feels very black and white, and the world's just not that way. And that's just my take, but I'm happy that you're in a good place about it. I had it's actually interesting thinking about your journey, because I think history is a huge player in a lot of postseason play, right? Like when I think about how, I went to Vanderbilt my first year, there was no expectation, right? I actually was expected not to make the postseason. So when I went to Virginia, my first year there, we make the national title, total 180 for me. Yeah. And it's challenging because at Virginia, it's similar, but not, right? Like at UNC, there's like this very high stress and expectation because of the storied history over 30, 40 years. At Virginia, it's kind of like the same old storyline. Hyper successful, winning a bunch of games, number 1 seed, number 2 seed, whatever it may be, never wins the big thing, the big show. So we felt that. And so the pressure there is different. We then lost in the Elite Eight, and then we lost in the Sweet 16 my final year. Again, won regular seasons, probably have a record for losing to the same team so many dang times. And you know what? I'll give Florida State their credit. They were our kryptonite for us. They took about literally three ACCs from us, over finals from us, and a national title. So but I give credit to those that win, and they were a great team. But it's interesting the point you're making, because I always say this, it's like, and I should know. I mean, me and Joanna, we're not therapists. We're not, we are strictly speaking to our experience. And the reason why I wanted to get honest and vulnerable about this is because I know for myself, and I think Joanna just alluded to this, is like at 22, my mindset was so different. And I wish I had learned this younger, because I know for myself, I felt the same way, right? I always said, oh, well, like, it's okay to feel this way because that's why I'm successful, right? Like I tell myself I fail, so then I push harder for the next goal. And in aspects, sure, that can be positive, right? You always want to be motivated. But I think what's a little concerning to me, and I feel like is prevalent amongst players and professional athletes for women, is this idea around like every like milestone that you set and don't hit, you failed. And that concept for me is hard to swallow, because I think about it and I'm like, you went to UNC, right? Like think of let's just take it back a step. When you think about the odds there, right? Just to be a UNC player, it's small. Just to be a Virginia player, it's small. That alone is an accomplishment. We don't see it that way, but it is truth that is an accomplishment. And then you play the odds, right? You're talking about how we have a 4 four at one point. Now it's 6. It was a 4-team ACC final. The 5th seed, the 6th seed are like 2 and 3 seeds in the NCAA tournament, right? These are top 10 teams. So it's just like, it's crazy to think about it, because now that I'm older, right, never would change anything. I loved my experience. I don't care that I lost, those moments. Of course, you're going to feel it in the moment. But I wonder, like, I do say, and it's more of a posed question, is like, I wonder if I had gone into the tournament not foreseeing I feel like I was constantly thinking about, okay, what if?
Yeah.
Instead of being freer in my approach, saying, you know what, we have a goal here and I'm going to do everything in my power to hit it. But guess what? It may not happen. And like, that's going to be the truth for 99.9% of us, because there's one winner.
Yeah.
And we've talked about this with a couple people, but it's like, I feel like when it comes to injury and other things, setbacks, a lot of players have come on here and said, okay, the moments I've been successful is when I feel freest. But yet how many times, I almost feel like that only happens when you have nothing to lose, right? When you're like, I tore 2 ACLs like Joanna. And it's like, what do I have to lose at this point?
Yeah.
Frankly, like nothing can get worse.
I think that's why I went into my 5th year with that kind of mentality.
Freedom.
I already tore 2 ACLs. I shouldn't be on the field right now. I shouldn't be starting. I shouldn't be doing these things, but I am. So the worst has already happened. Losing, let me tell you what, losing is not as bad as what I went through with my knees. Right. So if you can deal with that, then you can deal with anything. So I think something that's really interesting, and something that, our head coach at club, Damon, who's now the associate head coach at UNC, he always talked to us about the journey when we were little. It's always about the journey. It's about the journey. All those Castle listeners, they hear this, they heard this all the time. And I didn't really understand it until I was that 5th year of, it really is all about the journey. It's yes, you have, championships. Yes, at the youth level, we were national champions multiple times. We won everything under the sun. But when we look back on it, those aren't yes, we remember those things, but we remember the fellowship between the sisterhood that we created. Yep. And so for me, it's like, okay, I look back on my North Carolina experience, and it's like, if I didn't go through all that, if I didn't go through all those knees, if I didn't go through losing to FSU and then tearing my ACL 2 days later, and when we were trying to emulate a Sunday fixture and ACC Championship, like, I would not be who I would not be sitting in this chair right now. I would not be who I am. Sure. And for me, it's once you realize it's about the journey and it's about what you create on the journey, you become freer. You become way freer. And I don't know how to get that. I don't know how to teach that. I don't know how to,
Well, let me give you an example, because you just made me think of one.
Okay.
So people probably, I think they know this and they not. Me and Joanna, there's no meeting after the games. We didn't know each other. Okay. We probably knew our names and our faces, because that's just the soccer world. But no, there's no relationship. We're not even acquaintances. Nothing. Okay. We played multiple times against each other in college. So I think about that and I say to myself, it's a perfect example of a journey and where it's led you to. Me and Joanna love recollecting and talking through our experiences. And I can't imagine my life without Joanna. She's my best friend. But it's so funny because when I think back, I'm like, none of it has to do with literally what we did on a field. No. I never played with you on a field. I mean, we played against each other, but we didn't even you
and I have never passed a ball. We haven't passed a ball.
Literally. So it's it's situations like that and perspective like that that's really important to highlight, because I know a lot of you listening here are probably going through something, whatever level you're at, whether you're in your club competing or at a college. I know a lot of you, or NWSL players, who are going into the grit of now playing a full year. And that's, that's another thing to note is that
making it
everyone's tired. Everyone is tired. Let's just be real. Okay. After games, you're like, my legs I mean, like by the time, well, the one year we went to the national title, by halftime of the national title, I was like, it was pure adrenaline. I was in the heat of Florida. I'm like, my body is like, no, but you just like push through. And I think it's a topic I want to segue into is like thinking back on your experience, Joe, you know, what comes to mind when you think about, okay, we set goals, we set tactics. I wanted to get at this point is that there's so many other factors you need everyone to buy into outside of like what we think of as just like game planning. So as an example, I think about, when I was 19, I didn't necessarily take care of my body like I did at 25, more so because I just thought, oh, like I'm 19, I can just bounce back. Talk about like your mentality now as a coach, right? What are you trying to tell your players about, okay, mental and physical health, right? We are going to be competing hard. Every game's going to be a battle. You're going to be giving 110%. You may even go into overtime. How do you get your team on the same page when it comes to taking care of your body, sleeping, keeping your mental health safe? And if it's not, confronting somebody to talk it through. What's your message right now to players?
Yeah, so it's actually interesting you asked that because, a long season, we're down in Georgia and the temperature just dropped under 60 and everybody feels like it's Christmas. Yeah. So for us, we actually were just hit with like, everybody tested negative, but we were hit like with this cold that's been going around. And I'm just learning from Jay. Honestly, I'm young into this and learning from Jay. And we gave the girls two days. We gave the normal Sunday off after our game Saturday. And we said, nobody come to the office Monday. Nobody come to the office. Like, we're getting it sanitized. Everybody just get healthy, sleep, do work, do your homework, do what you need to do so we can come back in completely refreshed on Tuesday. And just learning how he manages. And I think that's something that I'm like, as a player, I'm like, let's go. Like, it's time to like ramp it up. And it's like, okay, but we're the managers now. And it's like, or he has been, I'm now. And it's like, okay, what do we need to be full force going into postseason. So if that means needing an extra day for everybody to get the sniffles out, for everybody just to sleep and to heal up that way so that we can start to perform. And then I'm going to take a quote out of Anson's book, is to live on a never-ending ascension. Then that's what we have to do. So for us, it's just making sure that, we go in postseason as healthy as possible, whether that be mental health, whether that be physical health, whether that be in the right mindset for school, getting your ducks in a row for school. So you're not stressed out about school when, you're on the field. Just making sure we're all healthy and all on the same page.
You know what I thought about the other day too? I was like, thinking back on this question, I was thinking about my experience. And I think advice I'd give is be honest and be vocal to your coaches, to the people that are controlling the schedule, or finding that leader in your team who can do that and approach them in a positive way. Because I think obviously you're all going after the same goal. Coaches as well, right? They want you to feel the most prepared as possible. And sometimes, unfortunately, because of that, right? Maybe it's like the approach is different and it feels like they're overworking you, but it's really just them wanting to make sure they're doing their role, right? They want to make sure you're feeling 110% prepared for whatever your challenge that you're going to face. But I do think, like anything, I'm not in your body. I'm not in your mind. I can't understand necessarily what you're going through without you vocalizing it. And so I'd encourage that, because I think there was moments that maybe I could have reached out to someone or been vocal myself later in my later years of just saying, you know what, coach, like, I know how critical like us working through these patterns are in this, but people are exhausted and we need a day. And at least knowing that you did that, right? I can't guarantee an outcome, right? It may not be what you want, but I think it's important to feel as though you have a voice in the journey. Because of course there's a dynamic there, right? Your coaches are your coaches. You're meant to listen to your coaches. I'm not proposing otherwise, but I do think like the best teams have that good communication, and coaches are willing to take that feedback in, especially from the captains or your leaders. Because to your point, Joe, it's like that probably will benefit you in the end. Instead of stringing people out, they're sick now 5, 6, 7 days. You knock it out in 3 days. And let's just be real. Let's just be 100% real. Everyone will say this. You're game fit now. You are not preseason fit. I used to tell people this all the time. It's a real thing. When I came in August, I'm like, you're running through games. By November, it is called game fit. Whatever that means for you. There's just no way. It's like, you're never going to gain. They always talk about this with NFL players. Like, by the end of the season, I've lost 15 pounds.
Yeah.
And then I have to work to gain it back in the off season, because it's just like natural. Like, that is the
grind. It's staying as it's how little can you lose throughout the season is pretty much the goal. How little tone, how little everything. You're never going to be 100% ever in the season. You're 100% when you walk through the door, and then you're not.
You're not. Yeah. And that, I'd like to go back to our favorite quote, which is like, give 100 of whatever you got. Give 100 of 80% of set, whatever you got, you give 100 of that. And that's okay. It's okay to not feel 100.
Yes.
So let's dive into, I think the bigger of the questions here, and something I think everyone will appreciate getting our input on, is how to deal with the pressure. And I should note, I don't have the answer to this, because I was not necessarily the best at this. And I can only speak to what I did and what I thought was wrong.
Can I pause fast?
Yeah.
He currently is on the mower right now, and he is listening to our latest pod of Mandy. And I'll be very curious to see what he walks. He always gives us the summary of what he thinks about it when he walks in the door after his mow. So I hear him out there on the mower. I hope he's enjoying it.
I'm sure. I love that Jay listens while he mows the grass. That's just a true TWOP supporter.
He's loving it. Okay, go back. Sorry, I just had to.
No, you're good. That's important. So Joe, tell me, you know what? Give me one experience in your life where you felt like pressure. Let's just get to it. Where you felt like pressure maybe impacted your ability to reach your goal.
Oh, Tina, that's a good question.
Yeah. And I can let you sit on it, and I can speak to my own experience.
Yeah, for me, I think it was that sophomore year after we lost Kaylee Ohai, now live. We lost Crystal Dunn. We lost 10 starters. And, we had 10 new starters have to jump in and continue to sustain that success and fill those shoes of those big players. And for me, I put way too much pressure on myself that year. We lost in the Sweet 16 to South Carolina, and I will never forget. I had a moment, and I look back, and maybe it wasn't, in the game you think it's so much clearer than it actually is. I haven't been able to actually watch that moment, so I'd be curious to see if I actually did have as much time as I look back and think I had. Where we were down, I can't remember, we were down 1, and the ball kind of kerfuffled in the midfield in that kind of 8-yard range, and I hit it at the goalkeeper, and we ended up losing in the Sweet 16. And that's something that I beat myself off. I did not let that moment, that memory, die for a very, very, very long time. I still don't really let it die, but I'm okay talking about it. Whereas before it tore me up. So I think that's that year, and especially that postseason, because as a freshman, you learn how fleeting a championship can be. All of a sudden you blink and it's over. And so I wasn't a freshman anymore, and I recognized how fleeting it was. And so I put way too much into it. And maybe if I was a little bit more relaxed, maybe I would have stuck that in the back of the net. I don't know. But I definitely think that was a moment in a postseason that I put way too much pressure on myself.
It's actually interesting because I didn't know that story. And so we have similar ones. And I do want to circle back because I want to talk about the reaction, and then how I think as time passes, you can maybe potentially positively spin it. But I, my junior year, I was the 8th penalty kicker. So let's just say Tina was not the first choice. Elite 8 home versus Rutgers for the Final Four. I missed the penalty. Probably one of the worst moments of my life, to be honest with you. I fell to the ground. I feel a little better that it was Casey Murphy who just set the single season clean sheet records, or at least she was a quality keeper. But so hyper pressured. I had a pit the whole time. Probably why I wasn't a kicker, because I was a very emotional player, and I think I put a lot of onus into it. I was messed up about that for like months. Like it was like, because like Emily Sonnet, Mackenzie Donnie, I mean, that's their career. It's over, right? And I felt responsible. Again, perspective's everything. There was many other kickers. Many of us missed. It wasn't just my kick. But I'm not going to sit on this pod and tell someone you're not going to feel like absolute shit, because you are. That's just the truth. We are all playing at the highest level. I'd actually be shocked if that moment didn't affect you. That's just how it goes. That's the disappointment.
I mean, I see it clearly right now. It was a freaking
I mean, same. But I'm like, I also don't want to set the narrative. It's like kumbaya, da, 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 da. It's like, no. We also have to tell her, it's also like, at the end of the day, we're all competitors. It's why we're playing at the D1 level. And I was broken up about that. And I think like, that's okay. Like, I don't want to like set this narrative. Like you have to be happy, like it's not easy. Like, this is why you compete. A lot of times being a competitor comes with a lot of sorrow, a lot of sadness. That's just part of the journey. What I will say though, is I do think, again, this is an elder person telling you something that's not easy to implement. And I'm not going to tell you it's going to you're going to learn this young, but I do think perspective is everything. And I feel as though those that have perspective and are able to rebound in a positive way, and that takes time, those are people that are typically successful throughout their career, right? Because I was someone who held on to things too long. And so I'm not saying not to feel, but I do think there's something to be said about, okay, you have to give yourself a period to feel like absolute poo. And then you have to say, I got to pick myself up by the bootstraps and say, okay, the mistake was made. I'm a human. Perfectionism is not possible, period. I don't care who you are. How do I do next? And you know what? I'm going to bring up an example because I think it's somebody who's completely changed my opinion about her, and it's Carly Lloyd. Yeah. And I'm just going to say this is a personal opinion. Carly Lloyd has faced so much in her career. Again, storied career. There were people writing her off, talking all this crap about her. Has she had so many successes? Sure. But there's definitely been disappointments. And time again, one of the most mentally strong players to ever play. I think that's something that's not talked about, is that like, I don't know, right? Like, I don't know her personal moments, but she's a human. I'm sure she's felt it. I'm sure she's had her cries and her frustrations, but she goes back and she trains and she puts the time in to get better. And I think it's something that's not talked about. Like, it's okay to feel, but what is the, and I can't determine for you what that window is, but I think there comes a point where you have to say, this is happening to everybody. And either I learn from the experience and I make the positive out of it. I get back to work and I go for more goals, or I let it define me as a player. And I think that's the difference between success in the future and just kind of staying on your own path, is like taking those moments and shifting them into positives. And I'm going to give you credit, Joe. I think, frankly, with the injuries you went through and kind of how your career went at UNC, I think you definitely could have said, you know what? I'm not going to go for pros, right? I'll preserve my body at this point. I'll just whatever. And you said, you know what? No, I'm not going to let these moments define me. Yes. Do I feel disappointed about the fact that we haven't won a natty? Sure. But I set a goal for myself and I'm going to go after it. And even after Chicago was a shit show, which it was, and we don't need to get into that, you made time at Orlando and you played. So kudos to you. And I think it's just, I'm, not trying to blow smoke up your butt. I think it's something to highlight. And I think it's an example of somebody who is it's just a good example of what I'm talking about, is that even in the pit of your worst moment as a player, you can look back a few years later and say, you know what, that defined my journey forward. And it got me to where I am now, which is a greater goal than I even had.
Yeah. Yeah. I could not agree with you more. And I think the most important thing is for somebody, is to believe in yourself and to believe that you can do whatever that, you want to do. And, for me, it was actually funny because we were on a long bus ride and one of the girls was like, what was your favorite moment at UNC? And I was like, that's a great question. And I was like, one of them I talked about was, I think it was my sophomore, junior year. We had to win in order to continue on with the ACC of making the top 4, and scored to tie Notre Dame, and then came up with kind of something that created the penalty that won the game with 15 minutes left. Those two things happened. But the one of the most proud moments was me stepping on the field in the spring after having my back-to-back ACLs, and going to your point of, you give yourself time, but then you have to pull yourself up and get after it. And I kudos a lot of that to my mom of not letting me, wallow in whatever sorrow there is. She's a strong woman and somebody that's not going to let you, you're going to give yourself time, but you're also then going to pick yourself up and figure out what the next step is. And you're going to figure out how to be the best at whatever the next step is. And I think that's just a holistic approach of a mentality that you can translate into any part of your life, whether it be season ending, whether it be look at Jay Mullen.
I gotta point it out for you YouTube watchers.
There he is,
Mr. J, just doing a quick left turn for you.
But just being taking that to any aspect of your life. Like I said, whether it's season ending, whether it's injury, whether not starting, whether not playing, whether not making the roster in Chicago and then going elsewhere and starting lots of games in another team in the NWSL, you have to believe in yourself, but you can't wallow in it. If you wallow in it, you ain't going anywhere. You got to believe in yourself and you got to get after it and you got to get going and get back on the horse.
So you bring up, and I have a deeper question for you, so be prepared. You bring up a good point. And two things I'm hearing is, and I think this is a good point to end on, is one, I think you're just bringing up the absolute importance of having a circle outside of soccer, because that perspective is always something super important. And I wonder, in thinking of that, right, when you're talking about your mom, I feel like you're probably going through the same journey as a coach. So me and Joanna talked about this the other day, is that we're being very blunt and honest, is that we felt like at certain points we were failures, right? Whether or not my mom called me and told me otherwise, or someone would say, that's crazy, that is my true feeling and how I felt.
My name is Joanna Boyles-Finema, and I did not win a national championship at UNC. And that's a long time for me to be able to say that out loud.
Right. So in thinking about that, right, you're a young coach. And I think part of why your mom, beyond her being so strong, is experience, right? She's a mother. She's taking her own experiences and then trying to be better for you. I think that's a common process. And so something you're bringing up, and I'm curious your thoughts on, or is like this idea of, me and Joanna were talking about this the other day, is like, at some point as a coach, Joe, the odds are you're going to have a tough conversation with players. It's going to be a bad loss. I mean, I hope it doesn't come anytime soon, or it doesn't happen a lot, but even the best coaches, even Anson, right, has gone through that, the number one coach to ever coach. And so I wonder, with that perspective, right, if we're sitting here and telling you honestly that we felt like failures, that's a real feeling. But then I kind of challenged Joe the other day and I said, what if your own player looked you in the eye and said, am I a failure? You would never say yes. And it's not because you just feel, I truly believe that's not how you would feel. You wouldn't feel that because you know the work they've put in, but yet you've had that feeling in the past. So I wonder, I guess my question is, as a coach, right, as you're learning and developing and having, I think you develop through moments, right? Like as you face these challenges, you have to just learn on the spot and learn from other coaches and experiences. How much that shifted your mindset around the idea of failure and the idea of disappointment. It's like, you're not telling your players to feel a certain way, but you're kind of like that voice of reason that's saying, you know what, this has happened, but don't you dare define yourself by a moment, and don't you dare not give credit to all the work that I've watched with my two eyes that you've put in over the last year. Because it's not just the season, it's the whole year and all the time in the spring and all that. Talk about, your experience right now, kind of going through that.
I think for me, and kind of, I think it can translate from player to coach in the sense of winning didn't drive me. The fear of losing drove me. And I hated to lose so much that
very true.
Same. Like I didn't want to lose. Granted, so then the only thing to do was win. So for me, I think it's every little thing as a player that I did was so I would never feel the feel of losing, that feeling. So looking back on my career and looking back on things, I can look back with a calmness and a sense of I did that because there was not a day that went by that I knew I took off. I never took a day off, whether, and I'm not saying physically, I'm just saying anything to prepare myself to be the best version of Joe Boyles I did, or what I could do, I did. And I can look back and say, and be at peace with that. So for me, I guess as a coach is, can I help players do everything that they can to feel the sense of win, lose, draw, whatever. Did I do everything that I possibly could to be successful? And if you did, you gotta live with it. You gotta live with it. And I think that's something that's, mid season right now, or mid in between regular season, postseason right now is everybody doing everything that they possibly can to be the best versions of themselves? Coaches, players, everybody. If we are, then we are only doing what we can to be successful. If that's not enough right now, who knows? I don't know if it's enough. I sure as heck hope it is.
Yep.
But that's all we can do. That's all we can. And I think that gives a certain sense of peace and a certain sense of willingness to then do the grind, do the dirty work when it matters in the game.
For sure. I mean, loved it. I love that, Joe. And I think you bring up the point of like, unfortunately, that's life. Even if you put your best foot forward and all the effort in the world, you don't always get the outcome you want. And you learn that outside of soccer, even,
all you can do is what you can do.
Right. Well, I think that's a great way to end. And I appreciate you being vulnerable about that, because I know that you're in the midst of it too and still learning through that process. And we are feeling real positive about CSU moving forward. And me and Joe will be updating you guys as kind of they take their tourney run here. So everyone keep, sending their well wishes to the CSU Cougars as they go on their title run. We have another great pod, another UNCer next week. Brianna Pinto is going to be joining us. She'll have a lot of good stuff to talk through. She's had an amazing career and is, just at the beginning of it. So we're going to get a lot out of her. But yeah, we hope this pod kind of created, vulnerability and relatability, right? We're not obviously experts in this space, but we can only speak to our experiences. And all I can say is, for me, is, as you enter this season of the year, whether you're a fan or player, whatever level you're at, just try to enjoy it. Because at the end of the day, no matter where you go or if you win or not, you don't get these moments a lot. And I can assure you, when you're out of it, you don't get them at all. So appreciate that grind and the hard parts that go with it, but just know it's special and it's not replicated in a lot of parts of your life. So just really, hold on to it and enjoy it. All right, guys, we will see you next week. Thanks for joining this solo pod, and have an amazing week. See ya.